Welcome, welcome, everyone. My name is Heidi Roth. I am a registered dietitian and health coach. And thank you so much for joining our presentation today on heart disease. We've got Valentine's Day coming up, let's see, on Sunday, I guess. So it's a nice month to maybe think about heart disease and staying healthy for all of our loved ones. So just a couple things. I've opened up the chat box in the bottom corner of my screen. And I always like and encourage people to, if you have a question or a comment, something that you want to ask, please feel free to ask that while I'm talking. But I will also leave a little bit of time at the end. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about a little bit about just a review of what heart disease is, maybe some of the new things that maybe a lot of people are talking about when we come to heart disease, maybe some of the old, kind of bust some of the old myths, maybe not myths, but expand a little bit on what we know of heart disease, the heart benefits of healthy eating, and just some things that we can do to lower your risk. Okay, so here's an anatomy of a heart. And when we talk about heart disease, really probably a better way to say it is cardiovascular disease, right? Cardiovascular disease refers to all of our arteries and blood vessels. Now, of course, having a heart attack is what we really kind of most focus on. We focus on the heart because if some of those arteries and vessels, veins get, blocked, then that could be fatal. But I love this little picture here of, you can really just see all of the main arteries that you see in your heart and all of just the different blood vessels that are in a heart. So when we talk about heart disease, we kind of all know that you can see those pictures of those arteries that go around your heart. And we kind of, really tend to think of heart disease as maybe a pipe that gets blocked, right? We've all kind of heard of that analogy. If our arteries are the pipes, we can get these things that clogging that goes on with plaques. And I just wanted to expand a little bit on that because it's a little bit, maybe not just so cut and dried and simple as we have a lot of cholesterol that kind of blocks our arteries. There's a lot more things going on, and it's really complicated. It's not just too much cholesterol. There's a lot of other things going on. One of the things that researchers have been talking about a lot that I really kind of wanted to point out was something called the endothelium. And the endothelium is just this really, really thin layer of cells. It's just a single cell thick that line the inside of the artery. And these cells are really, really important. They protect the artery. Now, when we talk about that analogy of a clogged pipe, a lot of researchers, at Harvard University and Mass General, they really kind of say that, hey, you know what? We maybe should think of it as more of like a pimple. I know, kind of gross, right? If any of you watch pimple poppers or anything like that, it's kind of gross, but it's actually a more accurate way to say it. It's not just that cholesterol kind of clogs the arteries. What happens is sometimes this endothelium, this thin layer of cells, can get damaged. And then cholesterol comes and it patches up that damage. The bad cholesterol, that LDL cholesterol, it has, anytime there's any damage or inflammation going on, that bad cholesterol is what kind of comes in and patches it up. And then you get like white blood cells and debris that kind of builds up in there, just kind of like a pimple, right? And when it gets too big, sometimes what can occur too is then you get a blood clot that forms, and when that breaks off, it can completely block the artery, right? So when maybe one of these arteries, gets blocked inside the heart, that's what you call a heart attack, because that muscle doesn't get the oxygen that it needs, and then it dies. And it can be fatal if it's enough of a blockage. So when we talk about cholesterol, we do need cholesterol. We can, we get cholesterol from the foods that we eat. We also get cholesterol that our body produces ourselves, right? You could have a completely cholesterol-free diet and still have high cholesterol because your body produces it. Because we do need some cholesterol. Cholesterol does many things, like I had said, it patches up some of those damage that can, happen. Cholesterol can't be dissolved in the blood. It has to be carried by proteins. And these lipoproteins, we talk about the good ones and the bad ones. The good ones are the high density lipoprotein. This carries the cholesterol back to your liver for removal. The L density, this is the low density lipoprotein. We think of this as the bad. This kind of promotes thickening of the arterial walls. And this is the type of protein, lipoprotein, that can cause some damage. So what are some heart attack warning signs? That uncomfortable feeling of fullness or pain in the center of the chest, pain or discomfort in one or both arms, the neck, shortness of breath, cold sweat, nausea, lightheadedness. I know, like a lot of things perhaps can kind of feel like the same type of symptoms. Now, it's interesting, in women, they tend to have different symptoms than your classic heart attack type of symptom. And so for women, it's a little harder sometimes to know that you are having, a heart attack. Things like heartburn and, kind of just feeling under the weather, or loss of appetite, a cough, right? So many things can maybe cause the same thing. So that's one of the dangers, for women, is that the symptoms are not as specific. What are some risk factors for cardiovascular disease and heart disease? There's things that we can't control, and there's things that are controllable. The uncontrollable things would be age. So in men, greater than 35 years. For women, post menopause, we're actually protected before menopause and have much lower rates of cardiovascular disease. But after menopause, actually more women have heart disease than men. And then two, of course, a family history. Now, a lot of times people say, oh, I've got a family history of heart disease and, there's nothing I can do. Well, you've probably heard this analogy before, but we would like to talk about it as the loaded gun, right? Your genetics and your family history, that loads the gun. But all of those things, those factors that are preventable, that's what pulls the trigger, right? Things like being overweight and smoking and physical inactivity, too much salt, too much alcohol. All of those things can kind of pull that trigger on the gun that already might be loaded just by our genetics. One of the other things to maybe consider too is that with a family history of heart disease, not only do we inherit our genes, but we inherit some of our habits as well. And so part of it just might be some of maybe the way that we eat, the foods that are special to us. Our habits can be inherited that could potentially contribute to our risk. And then, of course, another risk factor is something called metabolic syndrome. I'm curious if anyone has, really familiar with metabolic syndrome, or maybe this is the first time you've heard it. And metabolic syndrome just really kind of occurs to a cluster of different risk factors. And there's 5 of them that really increase your risk for heart disease. And thank you. Somebody replied to me that they hadn't heard of it. So I'm glad that we can talk about it now. So number 1 would be waist circumference. So get out your measuring tape and measure around your waist. So anything greater than 35 inches for women, greater than 40 inches for men is a high waist circumference. And the reason this is important is because that type of fat that you have around your middle is called visceral fat, and it produces a lot of inflammation. And inflammation, as we know, is one of the main things that can damage kind of that lining of your arteries. Elevated triglycerides, so greater than 150. A low HDL. If you remember, HDL is that protective type of cholesterol. It's the type of cholesterol that goes back to your liver, right? So having not enough, kind of recycling trucks to carry that cholesterol back is a risk factor. Also, high blood sugars. We don't typically think of blood sugars and diabetes having anything to do with heart disease, but it actually has a lot to do with heart disease. And then, of course, high blood pressure. Anything over 130 over 85. So if you have three of those five different metabolic syndromes, you are not only at increased risk of diabetes, but you're also at increased risk of stroke and cardiovascular disease. And they all kind of play into each other, right? Sometimes we become overweight, and then we get high insulin resistance, high blood pressure. High insulin can cause abnormal cholesterol levels sometimes. And so just these all kind of are tied together in this metabolic syndrome. So what do we do about this, right? We know that high cholesterol and high blood pressure are perhaps symptoms, right? They're symptoms of this metabolic disease, this inflammation. But what's really happening is inflammation, kind of free radicals are some, maybe rusting of the body, high blood sugar, clotting problems. All these things contribute to heart disease, not just high cholesterol, right? We used to just think, oh, cholesterol is, if it's high, it clogs your pipes and there's nothing else going on. And that's just the whole, risk of heart disease. But we know there's so many other things going on. Some people kind of make the analogy of high cholesterol is like the bank robber that got caught. All of his buddies that were faster and ran away faster. And maybe cholesterol was the one that was a little slower and ended up getting caught and gets blamed for the bank robbery, where no, there's a lot of other things going on. This high blood sugar, clotting problems, inflammation, all of those things are contributors to heart disease. So what do? I like this little cartoon. If you swallow potato chips without chewing, they act like little snowplows and clear all the cholesterol out of your arteries. Not quite, right? So several things that we can do. So let's go through what are the changes that we can make in our diet that are going to give us the best possible outcomes and the best heart health that we have. Number one is a Mediterranean diet, this whole foods, plant-rich diet. Doesn't have to be a vegan diet, doesn't have to be 100%, plant-based, but lots of plants. What do plants do? Well, you can see all these beautiful colors, the purple and the red and the green. All of those are what we call phytochemicals or phytonutrients. These are these antioxidants and phytonutrients. They provide color to the plants. They provide protection to the plants. And when we eat them, then we get the protection as well. So for example, when we talk about different colors, blueberries have this gorgeous blue color, and that comes from anthocyanins, which is a type of antioxidant phytonutrient. It does a lot of different things for us. One of the things that blueberries and this anthocyanin can do is it can help decrease blood pressure. And I just heard of a study where participants for 40 days ate a cup of blueberries per day, and their blood pressure came down just as much as being on blood pressure medication. So all of these fruits and vegetables, these plants contain, the rainbow of colors are all different types of these phytochemicals that can protect our heart and protect our cells and our endothelium, right? That little thin layer inside of our arteries that's very delicate. These all provide basically medicine to protect ourselves. Here somebody asked, I see, I always have difficulty knowing what a serving is. I saw that a fist size is actually a good indicator. Absolutely. Your fist is roughly, depending how big your fist is about roughly 3/4 cup to a cup. And for leafy greens, we want a cup. For things like blueberries, a serving size would actually be a 1/2 cup. So depending on your fist, it is overall a good thing to go by. But we don't have to be exact. But what we want to do is to try and get as many of these in as we possibly can. And by eating a plant-rich diet and, packing in lots of vegetables, when we go to sit down to eat, our first thought should always be, what kind of plants can I get? Whether it's a whole grain, whether it's leafy greens or nuts or seeds or vegetables or fruits. We kind of want to have more vegetables than fruits. But they also contain something called sterols and stanols. And these are just compounds that can actually prevent your body from um, absorbing cholesterol. And so they're helpful in, maintaining low cholesterol levels. So all kinds of things that these plants do. So number two would be to cut down on sugar, refined carbs, and processed foods. I know, I'm sorry to be the fun sponge here, but these type of foods, guess what? There's little to no phytonutrients in these. I mean, you could argue that yes, the orange juice would have some phytonutrients, but what the orange juice has is it doesn't come along with any of the fiber. It's just kind of plain sugar. And even though it's sugar that comes from fruit and maybe would have some benefit, it's still just a huge amount of sugar. Um, and so these type of foods, they increase inflammation, they increase our blood sugar levels, they increase maybe the chances of having a high blood pressure because they're high in salt. Now, I'm also seeing another question here. Somebody said, I heard that canned tomatoes actually have more lycopene than fresh. Is that true? Yes, that is 100% true. Many times when you cook a vegetable, what you do is you break down those cell walls, and these phytonutrients are actually more available. So lycopene, you get more, canned tomatoes or tomato sauce would have more lycopene than fresh. Beta carotene, cooked carrots are going to have more beta carotene than raw carrots because of the beta carotene is going to be more available. Now, it's kind of a trade-off, right? So when you cook tomatoes, you do destroy a lot of the vitamin C. And so that's why I always tell people, whether it's raw or cooked, eat vegetables the way that you like them. The important thing is that you're eating vegetables because they both have benefits, whether they're raw or cooked. Just get lots of vegetables in. Cut down as much as possible on the processed foods. Beet juice is, yeah, I'm assuming you're making this in a juicer, or do you buy beet juice? But, carrot juice is better than orange juice for sure. Carrot juice actually has a ton of beta carotene. And if you drink too much carrot juice, you will eventually turn a little bit orange. But carrot juice and beet juice still contain a fair amount of sugar. So yes, I would argue that they're better than orange juice, but it's much better to eat the beets and the carrots in their whole form than to juice them. A little bit of carrot juice added to if you're juicing some greens, or I see, you had mentioned that you buy it because you're lazy. Um, and I get that. And so, yes, certainly some carrot juice is better than no carrots whatsoever, than no vegetables whatsoever. It's kind of, but is it the best thing? Well, no, not really. Same goes for orange juice. Let's say you had no vegetables whatsoever. The most that you could do is get a little bit of orange juice. Well, that would be better than nothing at all, but really much better to get it, in this form than, in that form. Just being careful, reading the labels, making sure that the amount of added sugar, sugar definitely decreases inflammation. So for these added sugars, we're ideally shooting for no more than a total of 25 grams of added sugar per day for women, 36 grams of added sugar per day for men. You don't want to go above that number. So that kind of just gives you kind of an idea when you're reading the label of the added sugars, kind of what you're looking for. So the other thing that we want to do is add more potassium. Potassium balances out the effects of salt. And so potassium helps to decrease our blood pressure. Where do we get potassium from? Sweet potatoes, tomatoes, bananas, dried beans, soybeans, things like halibut, tuna, salmon, soy milk, coconut water, all of these things have lots of potassium. And a high potassium diet has been shown to be extremely effective in helping to maintain blood pressure. Same with magnesium. You know, a lot of people don't get enough magnesium. It's been suggested that maybe some of the soil is depleted of magnesium. So maybe we're not getting as much magnesium as we used to. And so whole grains, nuts, seeds, beans, and especially green leafy vegetables have a lot of magnesium. Uh, I'm seeing here somebody commented that they are eating more potassium and they're not getting any more leg cramps anymore. And so, yes, potassium can help prevent leg cramps, you know, when you wake up with that kind of Charlie horse in the middle of the night or even sometimes during the day. Potassium is really helpful there. So the food labels now will tell you how much potassium is in the food. They changed the labels. It used to be the old labels would tell you how much vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, and iron was, but now they've changed it to adding some potassium in there because so many people don't get enough potassium. However, I would caution you that most foods that are packaged, unless it's something like canned tomatoes or something like that, most processed foods, we're not really going to get a lot of potassium in there. It's usually those fresh fruits and vegetables that we're getting most of the potassium. So to some extent, I kind of think that, you know, it's something that not the best thing to put on the food label. Maybe it might have been better to have the vitamin A or vitamin C on there instead of the potassium. But anyways, that's my opinion. Okay, so number 4 is getting the right types of fats. And fats are so important when we talk about heart health, the type of fat, whether it's a good type or a bad type. Somebody's here asking if I can go back to the list of potassium-rich foods. So there we go. Those are some, you know, tomatoes, halibut, salmon. And this is going to be videotaped as well and will be on the Harvard Pilgrim website. So it will be available after our session today. So right type of fats, we want to get plenty of omega-3 fatty acids. So things like walnuts and fatty fish like salmon, herring, mackerel, sardines, all of these omega-3 fatty acids, what they do is they decrease inflammation. And the more we can decrease inflammation, the less damage that we're going to get to our blood vessels. Low-fat diets, you don't necessarily have to be in a low-fat diet to be a heart healthy diet. You know, that's definitely one thing that's changed from the 90s. We used to say, oh my gosh, you know, you have to be low fat. Well, you know, a lot more research has shown that that's not the case. And in fact, a low fat diet has the potential, not always, and you can certainly do a low fat diet in a very, very healthy way. But it can lead to potentially higher amounts of carbohydrates. Not always, but just, you know, that risk. And those refined carbohydrates increase our blood sugar levels. Cholesterol is no longer considered a nutrient of concern in terms of the food that we eat. So don't worry about eating eggs. You can eat the egg yolk. There was just a study that came out recently, and it was a meta-analysis of, I want to say 23 studies over the last 10 years or so, and they actually found that having an egg every day was actually preventative in terms of heart disease. So, you know, it's okay to add in some eggs. Saturated fats, controversial. You know, we used to say, oh my gosh, 100% across the board, you have to cut out any and all saturated fat. And the thinking on that has changed a little bit too, but really kind of the best type of fat to use is going to be one of the best types when you're cooking is olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil has all of these phytonutrients and plant compounds. Someone here said, I've been told people not to use fat-free salad dressing because they might not absorb the vitamins as well. That is 100% true. To absorb those phytonutrients that we were talking about, you know, the beta carotene, you need a little bit of fat. So much better to use a homemade olive oil, extra virgin olive oil based salad dressing, then you absorb some of those nutrients, and you're also getting those anti-inflammatory compounds that come with extra virgin olive oil. We have another question here. Is there any difference between the regular cheap eggs and the expensive eggs? Great question. Just keeping an eye on the time here. The expensive eggs, sometimes they feed those chickens omega-3 fatty acids. And then you actually get those omega-3 fatty acids in the chickens when you eat the eggs. So that's a little bit more expensive sometimes. Also, those chickens that are allowed to forage and are eating, grass and kind of, insects and eating things out in the wild, you'll see that those eggs actually are much more orange. And that's also some phytonutrients there, and that provides that bright orange, gorgeous color, a little bit more beta carotene. So yeah, I would say that, there potentially you could argue that there's some benefits to the expensive eggs. I would say the main benefit would just be more for humane reasons versus nutrition. But there is a little bit of difference. Then, of course, cutting back on salt. Cut back gradually on salt, reading the labels, making sure that you're not getting too much salt, using lots of herbs and salt-free seasonings. When you're cutting back, it's really hard to go from like a high salt diet to all of a sudden no salt whatsoever. And we don't want to go to a no salt diet. We do need some salt. But so that's why you want to gradually kind of cut back, and then your taste buds change. And all of a sudden, the things that tasted delicious and nice and salty to you before now taste like, oh, so salty. And so when you cut back gradually, it's an easier way to do it. Number 6, add in some leafy greens and beets, and these contain nitrates. And they increase the amount of nitric oxide, which is made from the nitrates that you get in leafy greens and beets. And this nitric oxide is a gas that actually helps to relax your blood vessels and helps lower blood pressure, and is very good for that endothelium, that really thin layer of cells inside of your arteries. Add more fiber. Fiber is good in terms of helps prevent maybe absorbing cholesterol, but it also feeds our gut microbiome, right? And helps produce something called short chain fatty acids that are produced by the bacteria in your gut. And these short chain fatty acids are also something that's really helpful for decreasing inflammation, decreasing cardiovascular disease. So having a healthy gut microbiome actually is really good for our heart. Adding in some sauerkraut. So sauerkraut adds in what they call pre and postbiotics, right? It adds in that live beneficial bacteria. It also adds a lot of fiber in. But sauerkraut and some other foods like egg yolks, liver, hard cheeses, they actually provide a good source of vitamin K2. We do make a little bit of K2, but good to get it from outside sources as well. And K2 is a type of vitamin K that's a little bit different from the regular vitamin K that we know from leafy greens, because it helps prevent that hardening of your arteries, the calcification of your arteries. So that's a good thing. I always like to say food first, but some supplements to consider is coenzyme Q10. It can help decrease blood pressure a little bit. If you are if you're on a statin, something like Lipitor, you do want to make sure that you're taking coenzyme Q10 as a supplement, because statins block some of your body's production of this. Magnesium can help decrease blood pressure, can be very relaxing before you go to bed. Getting in, if your diet's kind of borderline and you're not getting it in enough omega-3 fatty acids, you can potentially take a supplement. The studies don't really show that it's really all that beneficial for heart disease. It's more for things like depression that those supplements have been shown to be beneficial. So for heart disease, it's still kind of unclear. It's always best to get it from fish, from walnuts, flax seeds, chia seeds, if possible. Okay. Other tests to discuss with your doctor. getting your, what size are your particles, getting an advanced lipid test if you've been, if you do have a little bit higher levels of cholesterol. Hemoglobin A1C will show you what your blood sugar levels have been over the past couple of months. You can get something called a CRP, which tells how much inflammation you have in your body. And then homocysteine also can measure your status of some B vitamins, and higher levels of this are correlated with heart disease. So I see that we are just out of time now. And let's see, we have some questions. I've learned about the benefits of turmeric and have been adding it to so many meals. That is wonderful. Turmeric is especially known for helping to decrease inflammation, but oh my goodness, it has so many different benefits. It decreases your risk of cancer, can help prevent heart disease, decrease blood pressure. So the list of benefits of turmeric go on and on. So that's excellent, wherever you can add it into your meals. Let's see. Can you recommend how much coenzyme Q10 we should take? I would take the smaller amount, and always discuss with your doctor in terms of, it's always good to just kind of run it by them too. How much do you recommend if your doctor recommends something different? But I don't really think that it's a good thing to over supplement, right? So start with a smaller amount and then go up from there, and just have that discussion with your doctor. Let's see. Yes, the presentation is being recorded. It will be on the website, the Harvard Pilgrim website. And Andrea, I don't know if you want to just, if you can quick give that link to that website in the chat box. But I'm assuming everyone knows where to go about getting those old presentations. There are so many presentations on there and they're all wonderful and excellent. So there's food demos. I think next week, is it? No, not next week. Last week I did a food demo that might be on there too. And oh no, I was actually the week before. So anyways, every Wednesday there's some new, whether it's a food demo or webinar or stress management, lots of great stuff on there. So go ahead and go to the website. So thank you all. There it is. So, it's on YouTube. It's a YouTube link. Thank you all so much for joining me here today. I appreciate all the questions and comments I got. It's nice. It's really nice to know that there's some people participating as well. Oh, Andrea said they're a little backlogged right now, but they're all going up. So you might need to wait a week or two before this is up. So, all right. Thank you again, everyone, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the week. And stay healthy. We'll see you.